Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. For this review we are going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a good couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last year since I discovered them, and this brewery are known for their big fruity juicy sours, the Berliner Weisses, the Goses and things like this, and they are really shining in this category if you ask me. But yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Lund down to Malmö, and we're having a look at another beer from Elmeleven, and this is maybe my 10th or so review from these guys now, which is crazy to think. But this particular beer is called Another Earth. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a fruited sour ale with raspberry, blackcurrant, vanilla and maple syrup. So sounds pretty interesting. This beer was released as part of the local Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for April of 2021. The exact release date this month was the 6th of April, delayed a little bit because of Easter. But yeah, this is a brewery that I always keep an eye out for in these monthly releases that we're getting now. But yeah, if you're a big fan of the likes of Fermentararna, Morgendagens, Brewski, Wizard, Duck Pond and things like that, and even some of the Omnipollo sours. If you're interested in those kind of beers, this is a brewery that I would highly recommend that you check out. Their sours are on par with those ones I've just mentioned in my opinion, but they are still getting their name out there a little bit actually. So if you're doing your local order, keep an eye out for Elmeleven, because you will be very pleasantly surprised with these beers. They're very, very nicely done in my experience. But certainly looking forward to trying this one. A little bit different compared to some of the others with the maple syrup in there, but I'm sure it'll be good, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So let's crack on with this beer then. Very curious. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Elmeleven before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Elmeleven then, on to my brewery notes. So Elmeleven, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, and the company was founded by Anders Kvist. So he started his brewing project a few years ago, and he says that he views brewing beer as his sort of kind of artistic expression, if you like. But his interest in beer started when his friend bought him what he called a non-industrial lager beer, and he was just blown away by it, and this is what beer can actually be. But soon after this, his girlfriend bought him a cheap beer kit where you just add water, and he just thought that it must be possible to do things so much better than this, and that was what pushed him into home brewing. So he took part in various competitions and then joined the -1 or -1, -1, whatever you're supposed to call it, beer collective, which is in the basement of the Bishop's Arms in Gustav Adolfs Torg, and it was there that he sold his first commercial beers. But production was very small over the first couple of years, only a few thousand litres, but more recently he's been brewing in the Nerd, Chad and Lilla Ulfabriken brewery down in Rosengård, and he's had several Systembolaget releases over the course of 2020 and a few more this year in 2021 as well. Mainly these guys brew sour beers. They have released 1 or 2 IPAs from what I understand, and I think they released a lager as well, if I remember rightly. The very first beer I tried involving this brewery was a lager beer, if I'm not mistaken. But in March of 2021 these guys have started a new collective along with Nerd Brewing and Chad Beer. It's called Molecule, and they're going to have a new brewery in Arlöv, which starts off with a 1,500 litre brew kit. I'm not sure exactly when they're going to move into it and get it up and running, but they're starting off with a 1,500 litre brew kit, and that will mean an increase in output for all of them actually, which is pretty cool. But yeah, looking forward to seeing more beers making their way out there, and Elmeleven getting a little bit more recognition, because in honesty they really deserve it. I think these guys, the breweries that I mentioned earlier, Fermentararna, Duck Pond, Wizard, you know, Morgendagens, Brewski, things like this. I think these sours that Elmeleven are doing are up there on a par with those ones. So, as I say, if you like those breweries, then these guys are definitely worth checking out. They are hoping to add a few more different styles to their repertoire over the next little while as well, because most of the beers you get from them, I think 95% are these big fruity juicy sours. But the name Elmeleven apparently comes from where Anders lived. So this was Almbacksgatan 11, or Almbacksgatan 11 to give you it in Swedish, but Alm in English is elm, as in the type of tree, and this is just something that stuck with him from his home brewing days. But as of April 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 35 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and I think I've reviewed like about 10 of them on the channel so far. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Elmeleven for the moment. Hopefully at some stage soon you will see these guys feature on a Meet the Brewery episode. I have met Anders in person before. He's a lovely guy, very distinctive, lots of tattoos on his arms and a big red head. You know, big fluffy red hair, which is great. But yeah, he's a lovely guy. I spoke to him when they had a little bar thing in Malmö, which was great, so I'm sure we'll be able to arrange that at some point when the whole COVID-19 pandemic has buggered off. But I would love to get Elmeleven in for a Meet the Brewery segment, and you can look forward to that maybe sometime over the summer. We just need to see how things go. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get cracking then and have a look at this beer. Very curious. Now, one of the things that I always love about Elmeleven is this sort of concept album artwork that they have. I think it's just absolutely lovely. I think Anders actually does this himself, but it reminds me of a Swedish band called Aroma, who are just about to release their second album, actually, having been on hiatus for a very long time. Yeah, it really just reminds me of that. But there you can see the sort of space theme is continued with the brewery symbol, Elmeleven, the rocket, there you can see another Earth, and yet all of the beers actually have this kind of space themed name. It really just reminds me of, like, you know, concept albums and things like this. But yeah, Atoma, Atoma. Have a little search for that Atoma band in YouTube and you'll find some really nice ambient metal music. I absolutely love it. But yeah, awesome stuff, this one. Like I said earlier, a 6.5% sour beer with raspberry, blackcurrant, vanilla and maple syrup. This is going to be good. So 330ml bottle. I think I paid about 35, or yeah, I think it was 35 Swedish kronas for this one. So €3.50, about just a little bit over £3 sterling, and maybe $4 American, something like that. So yeah, let's get it out and get on with the taste then. As I say, very curious to see what this one has in store for us. It's the maple syrup that gets me a little bit excited about this one. I'm curious to see how that's integrated into our usual Elmeleven sour. Now, as I've told you in previous reviews, I find these Elmeleven sours, you know, really big and creamy and thick, and I love that. And quite often with these big fruity creamy sours, what you'll often get is quite a simple flavour profile, but it still just tastes absolutely lovely. These big fruity juicy sour beers that we're getting these days are awesome. So this one's actually got quite a bit of sediment on the bottom of it. Yeah, well, but these big fruity juicy sours we're getting these days are just absolutely awesome. So if you haven't got yourself into sour beers yet, I highly recommend that you do. If you want a more classic sour, go for Rodenbach. But if you want to get into a more kind of fruity juicy sour, then, as I say, Fermentorana, Brewski, Morgendagens, Duck Pond, some of the Omnipollo stuff as well, those are all worth checking out. And if you're here in Skåne, then Elmeleven, absolutely. But yeah, as you can see, and as you would expect from this one, then we've got a lovely, very rich colour from this beer. So before the head disappears, you can see that this one poured with about a 1/2 to 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say light kind of pink coloured head there. The colour of this beer is a very rich sort of, it is almost a very rich kind of cherry colour actually. I really like how that, I do really like how all of that goes together. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, and the head incidentally is just fading away to be a very, very thin foamy layer. But this one's got a really kind of big, fruity, juicy, milkshakey sort of thing going on with it. I really like how that goes together in this beer. But yeah, it looks great. It looks great. I mean, I actually would have thought when there's is it blackberries? I need to remember this. Is it blackberries or blackcurrants? No, it's blackcurrants in this one. I was going to say I needed to remember when it's blackcurrants. I would have thought that it would have been a little bit darker with blackcurrant in fairness, but then I remember, you know, Ribena juice. I don't know if you get that in Sweden, but yeah, blackcurrant juice isn't actually all that dark, and then you've got the raspberries too. So this sort of maroon kind of colour actually makes sense for this beer. But yeah, certainly looks the part. Let's have a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. That smells very, very nice. You can definitely smell the maple syrup under this one, and that's what makes it different from the beers that we've had previously from Elmeleven. You can definitely smell that maple syrupy backbone. But what you quite often get with these sort of big fruity juicy sours is an almost yogurty vibe to the malt base, and you can smell that straight away with this one. This has got oats and wheat in it, and the oats in particular give you that lovely big kind of sort of yogurty thing. So the backbone of this beer, you can smell a little bit of breadiness in there, but the oats are really, really thickening this beer out. It smells like a kind of petit filou yogurt sort of thing, like a big fruity kind of yogurt actually, but definitely some of the vanilla in there as well. You can smell the vanilla right in the middle of the nose, and then it feels like the maple syrup is just kind of stirred into this thing, you know. It just smells really nice and kind of brown sugary in a sense. So yeah, a little bit of a white bready base to it, definitely. Then you've got that big kind of yogurty, oaty, creamy sort of thing there, which is great. Vanilla again mixed into that, and then you've got the brown sugary layer from the maple syrup. It actually smells very, very sweet on the aroma, which is great. I get more and more of that kind of brown sugary note from the maple syrup in this one coming out. More and more of it comes out the further you go into the aroma with this one. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. So yeah, that aroma is quite different actually. I have had quite a few sours with maple syrup and things in them. I think that's quite a common thing for Omnipollo to use in their big sour beers actually. But yeah, I'm curious to see how it works out in an Elmeleven one. I think this is the first sort of sweetening element, if you like, in a sense, that we've had from an Elmeleven beer. So yeah. So with these beers as well, one thing is that even if they don't use hops, you still get a little bit of placebo effect, and you get a slight kind of green component to them. So with this one, I can smell like a teeny touch of earthiness, maybe a teeny hint of like floral character as well, but I do get a wee bit of a kind of grassy element out of this beer. Now, as I said, this beer doesn't use hops. There are quite a few sour beer breweries that will use hops, though what they tend to do with hops in sour beers is that they'll add older hops that aren't going to distract from the sourness of the overall beer. There's a brewery back home in Scotland who are getting a lot of hype at the moment, which is Vault City. They're doing some awesome sour beers. So yeah, they put hops in the beers, and it just adds a really, really nice depth to the beer actually. But quite often in Sweden they don't use hops with the beer, which is interesting. I wonder why they don't try it actually. I just wonder why they don't try that. But yeah, for this beer you do definitely get just a little hint of that placebo grassy effect for me. But yeah, not surprised about that. But on the fruity side of things, it is kind of pretty much what you would expect. You get a lovely kind of sharpness and tartness from the raspberry. That comes out right at the front of the nose. And the raspberry I think is the one that's giving you a lot of the sour quality in the beer. But then you also have a little bit of a, yeah, you've definitely got a little bit of a say. You definitely have a little bit of the juicier kind of blackcurrant coming out of this one. There are a few undertones to this beer as well on the fruity side of things, which you're always going to get. There's a wee bit of a figgy note in there. There's a bit of a kind of candied strawberry. You're always getting stuff like this out of the beer. But yeah, this one for me, it is in a lot of ways, there's a lot of elements of this one that are quite similar to what we've had from Elmeleven before, so a lot of it doesn't surprise me. But the thing that does get me with this beer is just how kind of strong and almost, I don't know if pungent's the right word, but you can just smell that maple syrupy note, and it almost gives the beer a little bit more of a kind of boozy vibe. And I'm guessing that at 6.5%, apart from the Imperial sour that we had last time, this one is, I think, one of the stronger sour beers that we've had from Elmeleven so far. So that makes it interesting too, because obviously the yeast is going to use up some of that sugar from the maple syrup in this beer. So yeah, interesting times. I think this one will be very, very interesting. But definitely take a little bit of time to go over the aroma this one before you taste the beer. As I said, it's quite a straight shooting aroma. It is what you would expect, but you know, the aromas in these big fruity juicy sours are just absolutely lovely, and this one is no exception to that. But yeah, let's have a taste of this beer then. So this one is called Another Earth, 6.5% fruited sour with raspberry, blackcurrant, vanilla and maple syrup. I hope I've got all of that, from Elmeleven in Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh. Yeah, this one is quite interesting because this one feels a little bit more tart, but at the same time it gets a lot sweeter in the aftertaste than some of the other ones do. So this is interesting for sure. The other thing I'm going to say about this beer is that I actually don't find this as thick as some of the other ones I've had from Elmeleven. Now, admittedly, it could well be some of the sediment actually, but now, having looked at the bottom of the bottle, there's not actually that much left in this one, so that's interesting too. I don't find this beer as thick as some of the other ones that we've had from Elmeleven before. Could that be because of the maple syrup, or is it just my palate sort of adjusting to these, you know, and starting to get used to these big kind of thicker sour beers? Don't know, really don't know. But yeah, this one feels a little bit lighter and slicker than some of the others too. But yeah, it's certainly still a very, very good beer, this one, definitely. But then the other thing I'm thinking about this is the last beer that we reviewed from them was an Imperial. I can't remember, was that 7.5% or 8%? I forget. But the last beer we had from Elmeleven was an Imperial rather than just a single, if we can call it that. But yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me, this one. It's always nice to take things in a slightly different direction, but it works. It really does work. So, where do we start with this beer then? Straight away, across the middle of the palate, you can feel a little bit of that kind of smooth, white bready, wheaty kind of element coming out of it, which I really, really like. But yeah, I think that certainly works in this beer. On top of that, you can feel the nice kind of smooth oaty elements. Kind of just, they don't thicken the beer up as much in this one, which is kind of interesting. They are just there and they sort of sweeten it up in a sense. So in this one, you don't have quite as much of that sort of yogurty, petit filou sort of thing that I was talking about before. But yeah, we'll take the middle third of your palate and then describe it out from there. So middle third of your palate, the backbone of the beer is that smooth, white bready kind of element there from the wheat. On top of that, you get some of the oaty smoothness there, and that sort of sweetens the beer up and also gives you a little bit of a kind of thicker element to it. There's a little touch of creaminess there, and on the front half of that middle third of your tongue, you start to get a little bit of the vanilla. You do get a wee touch of the vanilla sweetness there. But if you go further back into the kind of dead centre of your tongue, you get a little bit of a kind of concentrate, well, not overly concentrated, but you start to get the maple syrup element in there. You can feel the sort of concentrated sweetness of that maple syrup, which I can really appreciate. So yeah, that certainly works. But on the how do you say, on the as you go further out from that, actually you can feel it sort of becomes a little bit more of a slightly toasty and lighter brown sugar in a sense. So as you go out from the very centre of your tongue, you just move further and further out, the brown sugars do get a little bit less oily and a little bit lighter in a sense actually. So yeah, I think it works pretty damn well. But yeah, definitely not as thick. Definitely not as thick and yogurty as some of the other Elmeleven sours that we've had so far actually. Yeah. And this is kind of, it does feel like a completely different direction for the brewery in a sense. In some ways I'm thinking to myself, I miss the big thick mouthfeel of what you normally get from Elmeleven. So just be prepared for that with this one. This is a little bit different. It grows on you though. It does grow on you. You get a little bit of that sweetness, but yeah, certainly not as thick and creamy and smooth in a sense as the other ones that you would normally have from Elmeleven. But I still like it. You could get used to this type of combination over time a little bit. So interesting for sure. But yeah, I think that covers the middle of the palate in this one, as I say. White bready base, bit of an oaty creaminess on top. Some, the maple syrup just kind of sitting in there, and then on the front half of the middle third of your tongue, a wee bit more of a kind of vanilla element in there as well. The vanilla becomes a little bit more prominent the further you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, on the border region between middle third and back third of your tongue, again, you can feel a little bit of you can feel the yeasty notes and the slightly doughiness just kind of building up a little bit. There is a wee touch of a slightly grainy element in there too, which is quite interesting. But then the back third of your tongue is all about the smooth wheat, and on top of that smooth wheat, you can feel the more airy, yeasty components to the beer. So when you start at the back of your palate and move forward, you can feel the sort of height of the flavour, if that makes sense. It just kind of condenses down a little bit. It just goes like that, and then as you move into the middle third of your palate, it goes down quite a little bit, and it goes down like quite a little bit like that, and then the middle part of your tongue is really quite dense in a sense. So these flavours are all quite crammed together actually, which I really like. So yeah. But yeah, the combination of flavours in this one is quite interesting. The malt base, quite different from what we've had before. But yeah, let's move on to the edges of the palate then. So like I say, this beer doesn't have hops in it, but you still get a few little elements out of it. There is a wee touch of earthiness there in the back corners of the palate, but then as you move further forward, it kind of it just feels very, very smooth. On the front corners of your palate, you might get a teeny little hint of a sort of floral placebo, and then round the very front edge of your tongue, it definitely feels a little bit sort of grassy and zesty in a sense, if you like. But yeah, the fruity part of this beer is all about the front third of your palate. So again, let's look at that. On that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a kind of thickness in there. Again, a wee touch of a bread crusty note, and then the base of the base of the beer is a little bit more like the base of the beer is a little bit more like just smooth and oaty in a sense. The base of that front third of your palate feels like a little bit more smooth and oaty, and here in fairness you do get a little bit of that slightly yogurty element, but sitting on top of that, that's where you're getting the juicy fruity esters out of the beer, which is interesting. So with the raspberry in this one, you can feel it comes in and the impact is just right behind the kind of front tip of the tongue, so you can feel the raspberries coming in this one. They're giving, pardon me, the kind of sour element of the beer, but sitting on top of that nice kind of smooth oaty thing in this one is you've got a lovely kind of blackcurranty element to the beer, which I certainly like. But yeah, love the blackcurranty notes in this one. They're giving the beer the kind of juiciness, if you like, but then the raspberry gives you the sharpness on top. And you will, as I say, with these beers, you always get a few kind of fruity undertones. There is a bit of a figginess in there. Yeah, a wee bit of figginess. Maybe a little bit of a... maybe even a little touch of a kind of grapiness, which is quite interesting. I do get a little bit of a kind of grape in this beer, which I'm surprised about. But yeah, I would say the raspberries and the blackcurrants are the main thing. But yeah, a little bit figgy and just a little touch grapey too, which I did not expect, I have to say. But you can feel some of the nice raspberry juiciness just kind of going round the side of the palate there. And I think as you go further into the aftertaste, the blackcurrant starts to push its way out a little bit more too. But yeah, this is an interesting beer, this one. Definitely not quite as thick as the other ones we've had from Elmeleven before, but I really like how it goes about its business. So thumbs up to Elmeleven for how this beer has panned out. I think they've done a very, very nice job of this. So yeah, definitely a different direction from them, absolutely. But let's round off this tasting section then with the mouthfeel. So as I said, this beer is nowhere near as thick and kind of creamy in a sense as some of the other ones. This one actually comes across as quite slick. So top end of mid-bodied for me, maybe pushing the bottom end of full-bodied. Still feels like a slightly thick sour in a lot of ways, but as I say, just a lot slicker. Smooth carbonation, absolutely, and just a lovely, it feels like it's creamy underneath, but then it's just got a very silky smooth layer, a very silky slick layer sitting on top of all of that. So yeah, this beer definitely has some interesting things going on. Yeah, but yeah, in terms of the, what do we say? In terms of the malty side of this beer, then it's got a smoothness underneath. It does get a little bit creamier, but again, it still feels quite slick, and you have got a wee bit of the sweetness too from the maple syrup in this one. In terms of IBUs, I think technically speaking this beer is 0 IBUs, but it's probably between somewhere like 5 and 10, something like that. Would definitely not be surprised if there is a little touch of IBU in this one. There's a little touch of sourness in there, but it kind of comes in and juices out quite nicely. As I've explained in other reviews, for me, a good sour beer, for me, I always look at how the transition is managed in a sour beer from the big sharp kind of impact, if you like, to the kind of more juicy qualities that you get a little bit later on. So yeah, I certainly like how this one goes together in a sense. So yeah, the fruity juiciness coming out of this is pretty awesome. Yeah, I certainly like how this one goes about its business, absolutely. But yeah, fruity juiciness in this one, it comes out too. Wee bit of it does have a wee bit of slickness to it and a little bit of juiciness. It gets more juicy the further you go into the aftertaste, but the things that linger there, some of the brown sugary maple syrupy elements. Then I think it's the oatiness that kind of lingers there too. But this beer is not as yogurty as some of the other ones that we've had from them before. It's like the front half and the middle third of your palate feels a bit yogurty and oaty and vanilla-like. Those flavours linger into the aftertaste, but the rest of it feels really quite slick in a lot of ways. But yeah, I like how this one goes about its business. It gets a big thumbs up from me, actually. So yeah, definitely a different kind of change of pace from Elmeleven, if you like. But I'd be curious to see what other ideas they've got up their hats, up their sleeves, I should say. If they're going to do things like this now, but yeah, it would be really interesting to see. But yeah, I think we can round off this review there. This was Another Earth, kind of aptly named if you think about it, something a little bit different, from Elmeleven in Rosengård in Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Looking forward to more beers from these guys over the next little while. Slightly sweeter and a little bit more slick and oily in a sense, so interesting stuff. Let's leave it at that for this review though. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Elmeleven as well. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future, but as I say, check out their social media, check out my social media, and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skull, cheers, and see you in the next review. Make sure you check out Elmeleven if you love big, fruity, juicy sour beers.